welcome all. It's nice to see that more people are joining every week actually, and we're still waiting for some, but we'll slowly start. Today we have Matej from Croatia, also locked down, I'm assuming. Yeah, there he is with the sheep in the background. And he will talk a bit about his research he did on the Sava River, which is actually the river we were hoping to go to next month, or actually in 2 weeks maybe. So we can't, so we'll have to do a bit of exploring virtually, and Matej prepared a bit of a presentation to tell us what you did there, and then we have enough time to ask questions. So screen is yours. I think you can share the screen, right?
Yeah. Do you want me to say something about my work or what I do? Yes. So yeah, my name is Matej. I'm from Croatia, from Zagreb. I'm ichthyologist, currently on my final year of PhD. But I'm doing PhD on phylogenetics of one genus of fish, Phoxinus. It's European minnow. I don't know how many ichthyologists are here. But yeah, I'll share some of my experience on the research. Together with my colleagues, we've done a lot of research on generally on ichthyology, on freshwater ecology. And today I will present our work from last year that we did research of Sava River. It's just because I've planned this presentation to be about Sava River research, but in general it will say why the ichthyologists are important and why is research important for generally nature protection and especially river protection. And at the end of the presentation I will show you one article that we published together with World Wildlife Fund and Bankwatch. I don't know if you know about that NGO. It's about one hydropower plant here in Croatia that we've done a study about, where we proved that it has a huge impact on the nature, and River Bankwatch is now doing a research whether that dam should be removed or not. So if you have any questions at any point, just feel free to ask.
One short notice, can anybody except for Matej now turn off their microphone, because then it's better to understand. Thank you.
Okay, I guess we're ready. So I will share my screen. Is that okay? Can you see the presentation? Great. The story is about research of one section of Sava River. It's actually, you'll see it's research on almost 100 kilometers of stretch of Sava River downstream of Zagreb. We've conducted research for Lonjsko Polje Nature Park, where they asked us to do like an ichthyological study for application for a LIFE project. And the LIFE project should be about importance of Lonjsko Polje. It's a huge wetland, you'll see, for migratory fish and for fish reproduction as a hotspot. So wetland is a hotspot for fish diversity for whole Sava River. So I'll tell a few things about Sava if you're not, if you don't know anything about it. It's a river with spring in Slovenia, and it flows through Slovenia, Croatia, and Bosnia and Herzegovina. We share a border with Bosnia and Herzegovina on Sava River, and it goes to Serbia, where it goes into Danube in the town of, in the capital of Serbia, in Belgrade. So Sava is the largest Danube tributary. It's almost 1,000 kilometers in length, and it's Croatian's biggest and longest river with 510 kilometers of flow. Sava itself is really important in means of biodiversity or freshwater diversity in Croatia, but also all Sava tributaries like Kupa, Mrežnica, Dobra, and Korana, also large rivers in Croatia, are one of main freshwater hotspots generally in Balkans. The biggest importance of Sava itself is biodiversity and landscape diversity. In terms of biodiversity, in terms of ichthyological diversity, it has more than 50 freshwater fish species. And in terms of landscape diversity, it's because it's one of few rivers that has a natural background. Like I say, it's natural background. Mostly of Sava River in Croatia is regulated, but still it has a lot of wetlands which act as a hotspot for life in general. So we did a research on whole stretch of this portion of Sava River from the city of Sisak to the city of Gradiška. It's more than 90 kilometers in stretch. And the border of the left border of Sava is this huge portion of wetland. It's a Lonjsko polje. Lonjsko polje acts like a reservoir for water. When the high water of Sava comes during spring or autumn, they push all the water in Lonjsko polje, where they keep it especially during spring season, where almost 100% of species from Sava migrate in the wetland, and they stay there for one cycle of their life, or usually for the reproduction. Lonjsko polje wetland is huge. As you can see it also on the map of Croatia. So this whole thing here is Croatia, and this whole thing, this part is Lonjsko polje itself. So it's the biggest water reservoir and the biggest wetland in a whole portion of Sava River. This is a photo how it looks like when the water level is low. Usually during the spring season and the fall season, this whole area is covered with up to 2 or 3 meters of water. So it's a perfect system for fish reproduction. But not only fish, but mostly all aquatic life. But I will mostly just talk about fish because it's my specialty. This is me doing some sampling, and in the background, this is not a river; it's a wetland. So the plan for this research was to conduct a point research on 41 locality on the 90-kilometer stretch of Sava River. We chose our research localities based on habitat. So we want to cover as much as habitats, diverse habitats as possible, to have good results which we can compare to the existing literature data and to compare with the ecological data of all fish species that we sample, that we catch. So then we can do some modeling to see which of these localities are important for freshwater fish diversity. And especially we based most of our research on points for example, here, and also you'll see here and here, where all the backwaters from the wetland come into contact with Sava River, to see how important wetland is for migration of fish. So there is, in theory, we can discuss about the importance of wetland on migration of freshwater fish and their reproduction. But still, up to now, there is no any scientific and literature data on Lonjsko polje connection with Sava River. So that was one of our points of interest on this research here. As you can maybe already know, main research activity in freshwaters on fish is done with electrofishing. So electrofishing is a method where you can have huge electrofishing device, and with the current, with the electricity, you stunt fish, and fish is drawn to this net, and you can collect all the specimen which are stunned here in the portion of maybe 2 or 3 meters around this net. So our goal of our research was to collect all available literature data, and based on those literature data, we've done this. We chose these localities to be analyzed, and we defined those targets to perform electrofishing sampling. We did it from a boat, because you can also do it from the land, but it's almost impossible for big rivers to do electrofishing from the coast. So we did electrofishing from a boat with this huge stationary electrofisher. It produces 6.5 kilowatts of energy, and it's a great method to do the sampling, because you collect all the specimen that you can find in the stretch of 2 or 3 meters of water. It's a good thing, because it only stuns fish. You collect all the specimen that you stunned, but luckily fish recover after a certain amount of time. Let's say usually on the average it's about 10 minutes. Fish, all the specimen wake up, and you can just return them back into the water without any damage. A team consisted of 3 people, because you need as many hands as you can get, because the sampling, measuring, and riding a boat is really hard to combine, especially on the fast-flowing water. And on 41 locality, we performed the electrofishing, and everything was unified to get unified data. So data we can compare from one point to the another. We collected all the fish specimen that we stunned on the stretch of 100 meter, on the portion of 100 meter of river, from one spot to the another. So we can now compare diversity of species from one point to the another, mass of all caught fish specimen, mass of species to species, anything that we want to know and we want to see, we can compare from one spot to the another, because the methodology was set to do so. Like I said, sampling itself is really hard, but it's time consuming, and it took us about a week to do the sampling on all sites. After we conduct sampling on one point, then we collect as you can see in this bucket, we collect all the caught fish. Then we do the determination, and after that we measure all the specimen. We do the measurement of length, standard and total length of fish, and the mass of species of all caught specimen of certain species, and then we have our data and we can continue to the other spot. One of our interest in this research was to see how many number and the mass of all fish that we caught, but also we want to see how many invasive freshwater fish species we could find, because especially in the last 10 years, invasive freshwater fish became a huge problem, not only in Sava River, but in almost 100% of all Croatian rivers, where Sava is one of the most vulnerable, because we have a lot of fish species, invasive fish species, that are migrating upstream from Danube. And right now, problem is not, it's alarming, but not problematic as in our neighboring countries, such as Serbia or Hungary, where they have much more invasive freshwater fish species. We have until now only 21 invasive freshwater fish species in Croatia, out of 150 species in general of freshwater fish here in Croatia. Electrofishing is awesome because you can collect specimen from several millimeters or a few grams of mass up to more than 50 centimeters and 5 to 10 kilos of huge specimen of, for example, carp or catfish or whatever. So, yeah, we caught some very, very interesting fish. You can see this is, so this is pike. It's one of the top predators in Sava River. It's the mouth of the pike. You can see it can be interesting, but also you can find some huge freshwater invasive specimen. Some of them are not so invasive, like this grass carp, and this is highly invasive goby, and also pumpkin seed fish, which is really highly invasive in most of Europe, but in the most of the world also. And it's a big problem because it can be found almost anywhere. And one of the biggest, even biggest problems for this species exactly are dams. So during our research in the last 4 or 5 years, we've noticed in the most rivers, at least here in Croatia, where they've built dams for hydropower plants, this fish came with those new lake environments they've built for together with dams. So, for example, in some rivers such as Kupa, this species wasn't present over there until they built 2 or 3 dams. And 2 years after they built them, this species came and eradicated 10 to 15% of native fish species.
Can I ask a very blunt question here? How do they get there?
So pumpkin seed is introduced in 20th century like aquatic species, because as you can see it on its color, it's really nice, nice looking for to have in aquaria, and someone came up to brilliant idea when they grow too big for aquaria to release them in the river or lake here, and probably accidentally they were released in our waters, and now they come usually to the new environment with fishermen. So most of fishermen, when they want to have some interesting species and specimen, they introduce them without consulting anyone, and for them this species is just interesting because it looks nice and it's nice bycatch. It's not a species for recreational fishing, but usually comes with species which are introduced for sports fishing. So that's how it comes to almost any new environment.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, and for example, with the Prussian carp, this is a bucket full of Prussian carp. It's also invasive fish species and one of the biggest threat in any native environment where it's not present. So this species introduced from China, but it's present also in all fresh waters in Croatia, and it's pushing out almost all of our native species. But this one is introduced by fishermen because it's really interesting for sports fishing. And often Prussian carp and pumpkin seed can be found together because when they translocate one species, usually other comes together because they share really similar ecological niche. Also, additionally, what we wanted to do is to analyze riverbed, and that's why we've done also with electrofishing. We did scanning of riverbed, so whole stretch of the Sava River where we conducted our electrofishing research. We also did scanning. It's a good thing when you have a riverbed profile. You can compile all the data of freshwater fish species richness with a profile of riverbed, and to see which habitats are good for certain species and which are not. So we did side scanning with this side scan multi-beam sonar, riverbed profiling and bathymetry to see what are the deepest points in this stretch of Sava River. And on the field, it looks like this. So you get a real-time map, and by that map you can also see potential localities where it could be really interesting to do some sampling to see whether some species of fish can be found. After you compile the data of this sonar and riverbed profiling, you get something like this. So this is not for Sava. This is for one small lake we did also. This is for Sava, and this is like a 3D model of a lake system. Also can be done for rivers. And for example, right here you can see this is the map of river profile, and on this map you can see where are the most what is the biggest depth or where you can do some sampling to get some potentially interesting data. And you can also overlap it with Google Earth or within ArcGIS to get this model. Why is this important? Sampling in freshwater, especially for freshwater fish, is really important to get new, for example, distribution data. This is one of the papers my colleague published, I think 5 years ago, where he, with just simple sampling in the southern part of Croatia, they've accidentally rediscovered a species, which we thought it was extinct more than 100 years, and only with this, it was accidental sampling, to be honest. They rediscovered that species, and in 2015 they already said it's urgent to protect that species because its number of whole population, it's steno-endemic, so it's present only in one small river in the southern Croatia, and the whole population is estimated to be between 50 and 100 specimens. And actually this paper was the main background for my National Geographic project. So I'm currently, for National Geographic, I'm working on the research of this Telestes miloradi, where we will try to do ex situ breeding to do the reintroduction of this species, just to help them survive. Also, when you do some field sampling and you collect some samples, it can lead to new discoveries. For example, our past research in Sava and its tributaries led to discovery of one new freshwater fish species, which is now endemic only to this upper part of Sava River. And also, this kind of research is helping us to publish a new distribution data for, this is the data that we published 2 years ago. It's for two also endemic species for Sava River. And based on these last two papers that I've shown, this one and this one, we managed to get some grants and we managed to get some funding for this research of Sava River and the research that we're conducting this year and next year also. But also all the scientific data that we published had some impact also on European level. Like I've said at the beginning, these last two papers I've shown you led to, with our cooperation with World Wildlife Fund and the Bankwatch Network, led them to question some corporations, and especially to question European Central Bank, which is found to invest in some questionable projects here in Croatia. For example, they give a certain amount of funding, a certain loan for this hydropower plant on Kupa River. It's tributary to Sava River. And they built it with the funding of European Central Bank. Study that was done before building of the dam is not available to us to see whether it was projected for this dam to have any kind of impact on freshwater fish community. But our research from the last year proved that this dam had huge impact on the diversity, and especially diversity of native freshwater fish species. And World Wildlife Fund, together with Bankwatch Network, posed this really good question: Is it really necessary for a hydropower plant of only 1.4 megawatts of power to completely destroy stretch of 15 kilometers of one river? So that's why I think any kind of scientific research, maybe not only on fish, but on any kind of aquatic organisms, are leading to something bigger. As you can see, it's leading to some NGOs to pose and to question real questions here. So like this one, is it worth it to degrade complete river system just for a small amount of power? And yeah, that's it. If you have any kind of question, or if you want to start a discussion about anything, I'm here.
Yeah, cool. Thanks a lot, Matej.
Yeah.
I already see some clapping hands. Yeah, that was super interesting, especially to me how you also linked it to the river conservation part. Maybe you can stop sharing the screen, then we can see each other a bit better again. I can imagine there's quite some questions from people. I also have some, but maybe we can split them first into some technical questions about your research, and then afterwards into more the whole debate on what the role of a scientist should be, and whether you, for instance, really get your research on a stage or whether you hope for other people to get it. But let's first see if there's some people that have an actual direct question about your research. And there's options either to just unmute yourself and start talking. If you'd rather just write something, it should also be possible to write something in the chat and I can see the questions and post them, if that feels better to people. It's clearly a quite varied audience. Yeah, Jelena.
Yeah. So, hi. I liked your presentation. And I'm curious, maybe I missed it because I had somebody knocking on my door. But like you said that you want to estimate where is the highest biodiversity in which part of the river. So what was the result of this? So in general, which parts were the ones with the richest like number of species or highest biodiversity? Is this near to the wetland or?
Yes. Yeah. Maybe I can share a screen again just to answer this question. So we found out that biggest diversity we calculated just only with, for example, for number of species and with the biomass of whole catchment. And we've discovered that in these parts, for example, here on the locality 39, 41, and we have here on 31 also. So on the places where you have connection from the wetland into the river, there is the highest number of species and the highest biomass of all fish that we caught.
Okay, cool.
So that proves us that the fish are using these streams and to go back into the wetland, and after the reproduction cycle to migrate from the wetland into river again.
Okay, thank you.
Very interesting fact, since I think Europe, right, there's not that many wetlands at all anymore, right?
No, I think Loinsko Polje, downstream from Loinsko Polje to Belgrade, you cannot find any wetlands or systems like this except Loinsko Polje. It's the biggest wetland and the biggest system like this in complete Sava drainage system.
And so why are these wetlands so rare? Just because they've all been impacted?
The biggest problem is regulation, because almost entire course of Sava is regulated with levees. Even in Croatia, Sava is completely regulated from Slovenian border to a Serbian border, because we had some major floods in the past. And especially after, I think it was 1964 or 65, when a huge flood happened in Zagreb, in capital of Croatia. After that, they've decided to regulate complete stream, and but luckily they've decided to keep these wetlands, and except for this Lonjsko polje that I've told you about, there are several smaller systems around Zagreb. So at least it's something, you know. Although it's the stream, the Sava River itself is regulated, there are still some areas which are kept as they were even before the regulation.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. I'm quite curious because we have, as you asked the question in the beginning, like, is there any more fish experts in this room, so to say? I think there's maybe one or two if I look around. Either way, there's many disciplines in research, obviously. Do you try to link to other disciplines, or do you think it's important to actually stay specialized on fish and make that data available? Makes sense?
Like for me personally, or?
Yeah, for you personally.
Right now, I'm concentrated only on ichthyology, because I'm not sure if I do have enough time to get to know all the other groups of freshwater groups just to conduct research on them. But luckily, you can find scientists on other aquatic groups, especially on aquatic invertebrates. And the data, for example, you can combine and compile data on freshwater invertebrates together with fish data.
Yeah, one I'm thinking of is directly like Bernie, it was, right? From Canada?
Yeah, Bernard.
Bernard, like the data, especially since you have so much data also on the bathymetry of the river, right? Like that could super well link to, yeah. Like, how do you see this research? Could this be something that you could use again for?
Yeah, so for instance, what we are doing is we also have from our river the whole bathymetry. And when you construct these digital elevation models, for example, you can build hydrodynamic models that predict velocities and water depth as a function of discharge, for example. So you can also, I guess, include scenarios, and I don't know, like how many dams are being planned in that stretch that you investigated now, but you can, for example, investigate or predict how the habitat conditions would change if they would build a dam in the stretch that you surveyed, for example. And yeah, I guess like along these routes you can do a lot of things. It seems like you have a really good and interesting data set.
Yeah, Sava came into the spotlight maybe in 2010 when people from city of Zagreb revitalized one project that was planned maybe in the 80s, the last century, and it's called Zagreb on Water. So the plan is to build a cascade of 10 or 15 dams, but it's not dams in the real sense of the word, but it was like small, how to say,
Weir?
yeah, just to slow down the water. and to use that amount of water to produce power. It's like a flowing plant, hydro plant, which is not stopping water completely, but it lets water to flow over those kind of small dams, just to continuously run. But project is stopped right now because it didn't pass environmental impact study. But I think, as far as I heard, they didn't completely give up on that project. Probably they will do some kind of adaptation and they will apply for new procedure to do a new environmental impact study. And I think if there is a big interest, especially from some kind of political streams, it can be really dangerous if this plan goes through. But yeah, it's really important for for this kind of research to have someone like you, and it is planned when we do environmental impact studies to do some kind of research also on hydrology. But yeah, everything is regulated with laws, and we actually have a pretty good environmental law, environmental protection law here in Croatia. But the biggest problem is there's only few people who can put that law into the motion, you know. Law itself, so general environmental protection law is really good, but there's almost no inspections which will go out on the field and say you're not obeying that law and you're not obeying your environmental impact study. And for me, that's the big problem. It's the same with this hydropower plant that I've shown you in my presentation. In environmental impact study, as I heard, they said that the dam will rise water only for maybe 30 centimeters. And actually, water level is 5 meters higher than it was planned.
Yeah, that's on first science chat about that how hands are tied to activists and NGOs in Croatia, because since the enrollment since you became part of EU, so I guess that is it also like impacting the more action.
I didn't get
you
your
at the
question.
beginning of the question, Samra.
Yeah.
Repeat.
Yeah, sorry. I refer to first chat we had with Zvone when he talked about like social, political, you know, how NGOs can't participate in decision making in Croatia since it became part of European Union. About the system that like.
Yeah, but still NGOs for me play a huge part in this other step. Although NGOs are not included in the decision making, you can always question someone's decision. So yeah.
Do you feel like NGOs are the ones that should ring the bell, kind of should?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, he told about like that they can't get enough funds, so people are just like have to go like to fight on their own without any kind of financial support, and that's what makes it harder. So
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
but
we told
I'm
them.
curious about your perspective on that. As a
yeah,
scientist, no?
but getting funds for NGOs, it's a general problem in Europe. I think it's not only in Croatia, but still, I think NGOs here are real NGOs. We had some meeting for Natura 2000 ecological network where people from different NGOs from different European countries came and to share their experience and knowledge. And we had some I think there was, I'm not sure from what country, but it's, I think, from Eastern Europe, some of Eastern Europe. I don't know, it was Moldova or Romania, Bulgaria, or something like that. People came representing NGOs, but they're working in the ministry.
Yes.
You know, that's not NGO in the true sense of word.
We have that
Here,
in Montenegro as much as you want because
no, but still, here we have several good NGOs, especially here in Zagreb, and there are real non-governmental organizations. People are funding themselves through some European project, through their biological research projects, and they don't depend on country and governmental funding whatsoever. So I think the NGO system here is pretty good.
Okay.
And how do you work together mostly with NGOs? Do they ask you to do research, or do you sometimes also like push them to make something clear to certain topics?
Yeah, but for example, we have a good relationship with World Wildlife Fund, ADRIA. It's a part of World Wildlife Fund, but they are only doing some research in Southeastern Europe. And they have their offices throughout whole Balkans. They have office here in Zagreb, but they have also office in Belgrade, in Sarajevo, I think in Montenegro also. And they are true NGO. And for example, for this research that we've conducted on Kupa River for this hydropower plant, that was their initiative. So it's a pretty good cooperation.
Hey, you mentioned last year, I remember when we talked, you were super excited that Balkan Rivers Tour was going to go to the Sava, because you were like, yeah, that river definitely needs more attention. But why do you think a Balkan Rivers Tour or an action like that would be helpful? Like, what does it need to convey?
Because I think people need to be, you know, constantly reminded that Sava is really important to us. And I think people living on Sava River have to be constantly, how to say, you need to push them constantly to think about the protection of Sava, and not only Sava but all rivers in Croatia. But still, if they see that people from outside, even people from Europe or rest of the world see that Sava is important, they will just, I think, stop and think, yeah, it's our river. We have to do something about it, something to protect it.
Just a general question. So from your electrofishing service, how many species did you actually detect, and how many species are all over known in the Sava River?
We've detected 32 species, and based on literature data, there is around from 50 to 60, depends on the authors. But still, we didn't expect to find all 50 of them, because Sava is, like I said, 900 kilometers long, so you cannot expect to find all 60 species in the 90 kilometers of stretch. So I think most of species that we were expecting, we caught with electrofishing. for some, we didn't catch some species that we know they are present in that stretch, but it's simply because electrofishing method is, although it's the best method to do sampling, it's not good for some species. For example, those species who live on the bottom of the river, for example, catfish. Because electrofishing will efficiently stunt fish in the radius of maybe 2 meters. But if you have depth of 9 meters, you cannot sample anything that is on the bottom of the river. But we compiled our research data, sorry, with the data, for example, from fishermen. And that's how we know for some species that we didn't catch, they're still present there.
I have a question about, you just mentioned the fishermen, so I was wondering how you interact with the fishermen, whether that's like a cooperation. Do you see a lot of people when you go do field work who are interacting with their river? And maybe more in general, what is your feeling about how much people that live near the Sava find your research important or not?
Yeah, I was generally surprised and amazed with the response of fishermen, because especially on this stretch, fishing is like a native sport to them. So you can see a lot of people just standing by the Sava and doing recreational fishing. And most of fishermen are doing catch and release. So they just, catch, they take a photo of some large carp or something, and they put them back into the water. And I was really amazed on 2 places when we conducted this research. A few fishermen approached us saying, "What are you doing? You cannot catch fish with electrofishing. It's illegal," because it is illegal. So if you don't have permit, like we have from the Ministry of Nature Protection and Ministry of Agriculture, you cannot conduct sampling or any kind of activity with electrofishing. And it's a good thing, that random people will approach you and ask you, what are you doing? And 2 fishermen actually called the police, and the police contacted us just to see what are we doing. Luckily, we sent some kind of a note to them with our permits and everything, and so the police already knew that we are over there. But for me, it's a good thing, to see that also fishermen are doing some kind of nature protection.
Well, yeah, we started 5 minutes late, so we can also run 5 minutes late. But Jelena is really eager.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask about this fisherman connection also, as Anna asked, because I usually talk with hunters and they are not easy to talk to.
Yeah, I know that. I know that because we had also small research on large carnivores last year, where we wanted to set a few camera traps in one nature park here also in Croatia.
For lynx?
No, for wolves.
Okay.
For wolves. And we came into contact with hunters, and they weren't so friendly.
They don't want to tell you anything. But I have another question also, and it's going to be really fast. So I'm really, since I work with animals, so I'm interested in all these methods of catching them. And for example, electrofishing. So what are the cons of that? And I know that there could be probably some stress, but which kind of stress? Is it visible? Is it is there a mortality rate that is significant or not? Or is there any hemorrhage that could happen to a fish, or a bone breaking or something? That's what I would expect from electrofishing.
Yeah, it can happen. It can happen, and you have to expect that will happen during the sampling, because out of 10,000 specimens you catch, you have to expect at least 5 of them will have certain type of injuries.
Yeah.
But the good thing with, if you have professional electrofishing device, you can set everything by yourself. So you can set wavelength, frequency of electricity. So if you plan, for example, to catch smaller fish, you will set higher frequencies. But if you're planning to catch bigger fish, you'll set smaller frequency, just to, you know, avoid certain species that you don't want to catch. Now it depends. Everything depends on the sampling and preparation for sampling, and you have to have a good plan. What do you want to get?
Yeah, of course.
So,
and I think, like, is there any species that is more, or some group of fish that is more vulnerable to that, or not? Like, probably, I mean.
Yeah, usually, for example, for carps, they recover pretty fast and pretty good. But when you sample trouts, for example, they are really vulnerable. And once I spent 1 hour reviving one zander because the electricity stunned him pretty bad, and the specimen was huge. It was around 3 kilos, but it was completely no stunned. And the problem is, when the fish is stunned with the electricity, the muscles are just, you know, unresponsive.
Yeah.
And but if you keep water flowing, for example, through the gills of fish, they will recover. But I had to spend like 1 hour just driving a fish through water, you know, just to keep him alive until muscles relax and it gains control again.
Yeah, there's always things with, like, animals that you have to save them. Or for example, I had so many bird feathers that just were in my hand because of anything.
I understand.
Yeah, thanks.
Cool. Well, it's almost 6:05. I'm curious if either Maaike, Constance, or Ambreen are also there. They might contact you anyway soonish, because they wanted to conduct their research more from a social perspective on the Sava during the Sava River tour. Is there any burning question that one of you girls have, knowing you're talking to somebody that knows a lot about the Sava? Yeah, Constance?
Yes.
Last question that is for everyone.
Yeah, I was wondering, because you talk about dams, that this cascade dam that was planned to be built and like stop now, are they located in the surrounding of the park, or in the park? Are they any threat to the? No.
No. It's a good thing that complete Sava River in Croatia is within Natura 2000 ecological network, and if you're planning to do anything, any kind of impact in that area, you have to do environmental impact study and the impact study on ecological network, and that is pretty good regulated, and that's why these kind of activities are stopped right now, but it's not in the park.
Okay, thanks.
Hey Matej, I would like to thank you a lot for this introduction into all the fish in the Sava. I learned a lot. Just clapping that's possible on this. A lot of people are clapping, how exciting. Jens just joined us also. He joined us an hour late, I think. But maybe you can really quickly introduce the next week, because we'll have Demi,
yeah, Demi Renter. Sorry, yeah, I thought it was at 6, so I just connected thinking we were starting. Excuse me. This week is gonna talk Demi. She is a German US American, and she's gonna talk about creative writing for scientific communication. So, and also she does spoken word poetry. So it will be a very interesting opportunity to talk all the creative side of science and how to use those tools to communicate science. So I think
Maybe
me,
it will
be really
inspire someone to communicate Matej's research even wider. Huh? Great. Well, if somebody wants to still hang around and still ask questions, maybe Matej is even there. Otherwise, people will be able to find you, either ask me or whatever.
Yeah, and if you have any additional questions or you need anything, you can contact me on my email or whatever. So
yeah, maybe you can write your email here somewhere.
Yeah, in chat. I think I can.
Yeah, and then people can see it.
Yeah.
But we'll also share this one. Thanks all for joining. Ellie wants to say something as a conclusion.
No, just if the chat, if we write the question there, will it be saved? So maybe if for example, I have another question, if I post it here, maybe then Matej can answer.
Let's try it. Otherwise,
we'll
try. This is a good thing.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks all for joining. And whoever wants to leave, it's really the time. It's 6.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matej.
See you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.